All right, good morning, everyone. Thanks again for coming out. My name's Jack May. So today I'll talk a little bit about myself real quick, just kind of how I got into the research I'm doing now, and then I'll move into my project specifically. So let's get started. So hometown, I'm from Fredericksburg, Virginia, so East Coast, born and raised, grew up there, didn't leave until college. It was a Civil War battlefield site, so a lot of good history there. We have the Rappahannock River, a little bit, just a little bit about the town. And then if you ever find yourself in downtown Fredericksburg, definitely check out Carl's Frozen Custard. It is amazing. So inspiration. So kind of a little bit about how I got into the field I'm in, how I really learned to like the ocean in general, but also sharks very much so. So when I was a kid, the family would take family trips out to Assateague Island in Virginia. And then right next to it is Chincoteague Island. I don't know if you've ever heard of it. That's where they do a little pony swim from one end of the island to the other. So a little cool. I've only seen that like one time, but yeah, we would just go for the beaches. So that's where I first kind of just got to see the ocean like in person. Kind of saw how vast it was. Really appreciated the fact that you can't see what's swimming around underneath. So that just kind of grabbed my attention and just spoke from a young age. Grew up fishing. Always enjoy fishing. Still fish now from time to time. So just again. Really get excited about, dropping something in the water, and you never know what you're going to pull out. So it's really fun. All right. Documentary. So this is Sir David Attenborough. So I remember a shark documentary when I was a young kid, absolutely grabbed me. And then from then on, I was hooked. So just absolutely love, the ocean, learn as much as I can. And then last but certainly not least, probably saw it way too young of an age with the major motion picture Jaws, right? So although this gave me a healthy fear and respect for the ocean for the rest of my life, because I saw it way too young, definitely, there's marine biologists in the movie, and I was like, wow, this guy's, learning as much as he can about sharks, he really has a passion for it. So although this movie's not too true to, how things really are, definitely got my attention, and made me want to learn. All right, so undergrad. So for undergraduate, I went to the University of North Carolina, Wilmington, very nice town on the coast there in North Carolina. I majored in marine biology there. I worked with an ichthyology professor there, so working on building fishes. We would do seine pools, but over there on the East Coast, it gets a little bit cooler in the wintertime. Water temperatures get really cold, so a lot of people would stop showing. So I built a good relationship with the professor there, helping pull nets, during the wintertime. Again, very much enjoying pulling a net out of the ocean and seeing okay, what did we get today? Those aren't supposed to be here right now, so enjoyed that a lot. So also, late high school and during college, I kind of got an itch a little bit for the military also. So while I was going to undergrad, I also spent 2 6-week summers at Officer Candidate School, Quantico, Virginia. So that's me with a lot less hair back then. Did that. After finishing that school, commissioned after finishing college. So that's on the USS North Carolina there in Wilmington, North Carolina. Got commissioned. And then went off to the fleet, where I got stationed in Camp Pendleton, California. So that's how I first landed out here in California, which kind of led me on the path, ended up where I did. So things kind of worked out really well for me. So there I am, just in Camp Pendleton, wearing my mop gear, so very hot, very miserable, just for training, and I don't know why. So typing away in big, thick rubber gloves, sweating, trying to answer phones, That's just an example of all the good times. So I did 2 deployments. So basically, you take the infantry battalion, put them on 3 different ships. We would go sail all around the world. So we kind of bounced around through the Pacific. Then we'd end up in the Middle East, kind of float around there for a few months, then kind of work our way back. So I got to see a lot of cool countries I otherwise wouldn't have expected to see. So I got to see Bahrain, Malaysia, Singapore. Did a little bit of diving there. My executive officer, who was basically my boss, he was a dive master. So he actually got me scuba certified. And then I got my advanced open water also. So again, things were just kind of lining up in such a way that was kind of building up for my future to kind of go back to my original passion. So while I was on ship, a lot of downtime. I was on ship for 1 year and 4 months total with the 2 deployments. So spent a lot. I brought a couple of textbooks with me. I just kind of read through about my fishes, a little bit about invertebrates. So kind of trying to keep my hands on some of that knowledge. So then that's Hawaii there in the background. So on the way back from both deployments, I got to meet up with my old buddy from undergrad, Mark Royer, who's a PhD student out there currently at the University of Hawaii. He's doing a lot of shark research on things like hammerheads, a lot of interesting research. They have some shark fins out on the island, and he actually lives on Coconut Island, which if you ever, forever who remembers Gilligan's Island, that is actually the island in the beginning sequence of that show. So I got to stay there on Coconut Island for a few days, see the shark fins, got to feed them. And at that point, if I wasn't positive that I wanted to get back in the marine biology game, at that point I was. So he actually recommended that I get in contact with Dr. Chris Lowe up in Long Beach. So it's just an hour drive from where I was living in San Clemente. went up there, things went fairly well. I applied, and here I am today. So I got accepted, now I'm in the shark lab, having a good time. So currently working towards a master's degree. So I just finished up my first year. This is my first field season. I just got here about a week ago, so I'm like hitting the ground sprinting right now, trying to, get some good data. So so not only at the Shark Lab do I work on my project, which is the Leopard shark, which I'm going to talk about here shortly, but we also help out the other grad students. So one student, Alyssa Clemenstein, she actually works on like giant sea bass. So we'll do like little surveys around the island here looking for giant sea bass. We have our juvenile white shark project. So there I am with Chris Lowe, and basically we'll use our boat as kind of like a little aircraft carrier to do surveys for juvenile white sharks. And if we can find them, we'll give them a tag, and that way they can be kind of tracked like passively over time. But then you can see touchdown, we did it. So that's been a really good technique for us. It's a lot cheaper than helicopters, and like a lot fine resolution. We can put, see where we want to see when we want to see it. So pretty cool. All right, without any further ado, I'll actually talk about my project now. So I want to start off just by talking about aggregations, which basically is just groups of animals coming together, right? So from an evolutionary standpoint, the benefits of them coming together need to outweigh the costs. So some of the benefits can be for social reasons, like people, dolphins, they want to come together because they just genuinely enjoy each other's company, and then also it can be for like reproductive. So you come into a big group to find a mate, or to exploit a resource. So maybe this is a lot of predators looking for some prey items, right? Or it could also be to exploit like an environmental condition. So like if you're trying to find warm water or, a certain type of habitat where like there's shade in the trees and you don't want to be out in the sun. These are some different things that can kind of cause things to benefit from being in a group. There's also some defensive capabilities, being in a group, safety in numbers. And then also, but there are some downsides, right? So increased potential for disease transmission. So you put a lot of people in really close proximity, diseases can spread really easily, really quickly. So spending all that time on ship, a lot of people from all over the world packed together. A lot of people are very sick very often. So then also you have increased competition, right? So let's say, all these penguins are trying to stay warm. They'll have to, kind of take turns being in the middle. If they're all looking for a particular prey item, once there's more and more individuals like predators, all of a sudden there may not be enough food to go around, right? So as more and more individuals are present, there can actually be competition between them to get access to a resource. All right, so vulnerability. So like I said a couple seconds ago, there is a benefit to there being like, safety in numbers, but also, as you can see, a lot of individuals can be moved really quickly if you're all bunched up together, right? So, humans have been doing this for hundreds of years, using fishing nets, whether it's bison, like taking advantage of the fact that a lot of animals are very close to each other to remove a lot of them quickly. Think about like whales going after things like krill or like small fish that are all like in little bait balls. So there is a downside to all being packed in together. All right, so now finally to the leopard sharks, all right? So it's a common nearshore species. So they do this little aggregation behavior during the day. They tend to take off during the night, then come back the next day. So they don't necessarily come back to the same spot every time. Some of the ones that they've done some previous work in the past where they'll tag individuals here on the island, and they'll make all their way all the way down to like La Jolla, close to San Diego, California. So they do tend to travel. So they're not super like loving one spot all the time. Slow to mature. So from birth to the point where they reach sexual maturity, you're talking 10 to 12 years. Long gestation periods of up to a year. So once they're pregnant, it takes about a year for them to give birth. They range all the way from Mexico to Oregon, USA. So pretty much a West Coast distribution, close to shore. So you're not going to typically find these guys out swimming out in the middle of the ocean. All right. So back in the 1980s, early 1990s, their populations actually fell really intensely because they were, say, near-shore gillnet fisheries. So basically really close to shore. You had these nets out in the ocean that were just indiscriminately catching anything that would happen to swim across that path. So there. In 1994, they actually put an end to that gillnet fishery in Southern California. And then so from there, so just to go over the graph real quick, catch in metric tons. So with about the same amount of like fishing effort, you can see it tends to go down. So even though they're still fishing into like, the same amount in those areas, the catch numbers start to go down. That's basically telling you that the numbers of sharks are actually decreasing. Again, that has a lot to do with their life history, which is the fact that it takes them a long time to mature, and it takes them a long time to give birth to offspring, and they don't typically have a lot of them either. So on this next figure, though, catch per unit effort here on the y-axis, and then this is over the years. So this is starting in 1995, so right after that ban. And you can see with the same amount of effort, those catch numbers actually start to increase. So it shows that although this shark species is vulnerable to overfishing, with a little bit of management and banning some certain types of fisheries, their numbers can actually come back. So right now, their populations are doing very well, and we'd like to keep it that way. All right. So a little bit now about like why exactly they're doing this aggregating behavior in this shallow, warm water, right? So prior studies have shown, basically you have these white columns right here. Those are the daylight hours. And then the dark is nighttime. And basically what you're just seeing is water temperature going up during the day, decreasing at night. Not crazy, right? But the interesting thing is the black line here with the black diamonds, those are average numbers of sharks present. And then the white circles with the dashed line is the average water temperatures. So the cool thing is here is that as the water temperature increases, so too does the number of sharks. And then as the temperature decreases, the number of sharks start to drop off, right? So they're basically showing up for the warm water and then taking off once the sun sets and the water starts to cool down. So they're basically more of a nocturnal species. So at night is when they expected to go off into deeper waters. They're expected to be foraging, looking for food items, and then the next day they'll come back to a spot. That's not necessarily the same one, but a spot. All right. And then they're mostly mature females. So starting to think, okay, so they're looking for warm water. Why is it that we think that they're looking for this warm water? So it turns out pretty much the vast majority of the individuals that are present in these groups in the shallow water are all mature females. So, and then from many of the ones that they've checked, they're all pretty much pregnant. So they're thinking, okay, they're an ectothermic species, which means that their body temperature is basically going to match like the water temperature that's around them. They're cold-blooded, as it's called. So if they go into warm water, they can increase their body temperature. So if you're a mature female that's pregnant, if you can get access to this warm water, warm your body temperature up, you can actually give birth to your offspring faster. Like your embryos will develop quicker, and you can give birth faster. Then you can mate sooner, make more little baby sharks. So all of our mama sharks are basically trying to find some warm water so they can give birth faster. Pretty cool. All right. So some of the things we're basically just trying to look at to take the next step is like we're trying to get size measurements of individuals so we can see maybe, okay, we know they're all mature females, but maybe are the largest ones kind of dominating the warmest water that's available. So I want to see if like larger individuals are in the center of these aggregations versus smaller ones off to the sides or maybe getting kicked off entirely as like density increases, so lots of individuals get packed in. And then also to see if there's any kind of like social interactions going on, things like that. So a little bit about my design. I'm looking at 4 different locations here on the island, as well as 2 on the mainland. Right now, I'm just getting started with Big Fisherman's Cove, but no sharks right now, unfortunately, due to some sea lions attacking them. So might have to pick up and move here pretty soon, but that's okay. That's kind of worked into the plan. So 6 total sites, and these are all like confirmed aggregation sites, unless there's sea lions around apparently. And then each one will be surveyed for roughly 2 weeks between July to September, which are pretty much like the peak months where the water's warmest. And they tend to aggregate. So that's what we're looking for. This is the Phantom 4 Pro, so I'll be using a drone to look at them from the sky. And the idea here is that this video footage is geo-referenced, so I'm also going to make some temperature maps using these hobo temperature loggers right there. And then basically I can take the two and merge them together, right, because the video is geo-referenced. So I can basically take my temperature map and then plot the sharks like right on top of them to see like what kind of temperatures the sharks are occupying. All right, so this is Big Fisherman's Cove. Maybe you're familiar with it. It's right outside. All right, so this is basically just an example of the highest altitude flight I'll do, which is about 25 meters. And that's just a quick little flight to identify, hey, are there any sharks present? If so, like, great, now I'm going to go fly over them, right? Collect some footage. So the surveys will be flown in 3 segments. So that's kind of the example of that first one, which is done at that highest altitude of 25 meters. Then, okay, here's my little shark swimming in the water. That's that first segment where I have my widest angle of view. Then I drop down to basically just an altitude where I can fit that one aggregation at a time within a frame. I'll record there for about 10 minutes, and then once I have that, this is where I'll go to my lowest altitude, which is 10 meters. And from here, I can basically get high-resolution footage where I can actually attempt to get the size estimates from the individuals. And the way I'm going to do that is I have little yellow discs, concrete discs I made sitting in the water. And since I know what size they are, I can then, extrapolate or whatever and kind of get an idea of how big the animals are. All right, so here's a quick little video, just give you an idea of what this looks like. So this would be from like a higher elevation, probably in between 25, 10 meters, so like roughly 20. And yeah, you can just see the individuals swimming around. Not only do we have leopard sharks here, but kind of in the top right corner, you can also see shovel-nosed guitarfish. So a couple different elasmobrings kind of hanging out. Yeah, so this is just typical behavior during the day. They kind of slowly kind of mill about, They'll even kind of just rest on the bottom, so pretty cool. All right, so while I'm flying these drones, I actually have to throw this little black sheet over my head so I can basically see like the live video feed. So while that survey's flying autonomously, like I don't have to touch the controls or anything. I'm just watching this like live feed looking for sharks, right? So it's pretty funny because I look pretty ridiculous with it. So, but yeah, so this is how I feel like I look, right? You know, very majestic, you know, wonderful. But this is the reality of it. So yeah, there we go. So, good times, right? You know, no questions asked. All right, so back to the size estimates, right? So here's an example of more of like a lower altitude, higher resolution footage. And so basically I can take image J, which is like a little computer program, take that cement disk that I know is of a known size, that's also in the frame, tell it, hey, this many pixels across is 30 centimeters, this shark is, you know, however many pixels across, how long is the shark? So this is essentially the way I'll be getting my size estimates for sharks. All right, so then for my temperature maps, so those little concrete discs that are out there are basically kind of spread out like in a kind of semi-grid pattern, and basically they collect temperature data every hour from the sea floor. And then what I can do when I finally go and collect those is use like interpolation techniques where basically from all those known points of temperature kind of fills in the dots there, and you basically end up with something that looks kind of like this, right? So this is Big Fisherman's Cove from a previous study, and you can see the warmest water is to the bottom right there, and then as it gets deeper, it actually gets a little bit cooler as you move out of the cove. So this is why we think the sharks are moving into that water. Interestingly enough, there was an El Nino year a few years back. Sharks did not like aggregate. And so the reason they think that is because of things like sea lions that can hunt them and kill them. There's really a risk that comes into play when you come into the shallow water. So if it's an El Nino year, the water's warm everywhere, not necessarily a big drive to force these animals into shallow water. So pretty interesting. All right, so this is one of those little cement discs out there. This one I just thought would be kind of neat to show real quick because it's one of the deeper ones we did. It was about 29 feet. So just kind of dropping it down. Sorry, the video's a little jumbly, but yeah, so drop it on down, gets to the bottom, and then I got to go detach that line, right? So now I'm just swimming down to about 29 feet. I also have a dive computer in my right hand, and basically I'll get the depth at the bottom real quick, just unclip that line, and then swim back up to the surface. And then we have about 50 of these, so rinse and repeat, do that about 50 times, call it a day, right? So it's been interesting. Learned how to free dive like a few days ago, so that was cool. Yeah, so it's been a really good time. Yeah, so there you go. Eventually get back to the surface, get that sweet air. All right, cool. All right, so some data analysis. So, okay, so now that I got all this video, okay, like what am I going to do with it, right? So Harvey Mudd College has helped us out with a little program basically that'll help like track each individual shark. We can do some like network analysis, see if like individuals tend to like to be close to each other, again, to see if they're not only here just looking for this warm water, but maybe they're actually, just doing this because they like to come together, right? We don't necessarily expect that, but we're going to look to see if it's there. So we can check things like their velocity, so like how fast each one's moving, their blob size, so like if this blob, shark intersects with another one, basically what you end up with is the blob becomes bigger, right? So then it uses some like basic like physics rules to kind of predict as they separate to keep track of which shark was which, right? So there's a quick little video here that kind of gives you an idea of roughly what that looks like. So it's tracking that one shark there in the yellow, and as it intersects, it keeps track of which one's which, right? So just a neat little video, something we're going to try and do here again in this year to come. So cool computer software that Harvey Mudd College just helps us out with, so pretty cool. And then you can basically do that simultaneously for all of them, which is really neat, so not just the one.
Is that Cat Harvey?
I believe it is. Yes, it is. All right, so sharks and drones, right? Pretty cool, but like, who cares, right? So why are we doing this? So basically, we're taking the next step in understanding their aggregation behavior. So we've kind of seen in the past that, yes, we know they're going to warm water. We kind of know that they can move from site to site. But now we're taking the next step to see, like, what exact temperatures do they like? Is there any competition going on where, like, if you're larger, it's going to benefit you versus, like, a slightly smaller, like, mature female might kind of get passively worked to the outside so they can't get access to those warmest temperatures. Seeing if there's social interaction. Also just starting to kind of develop some of these drone technologies for not only this project, but similar projects like our White Shark project, kind of get an idea of how to best fly our routes to detect sharks. Leopard sharks are high trophic level species, so not necessarily like apex predators, but they're pretty high up, important predators, where if you take all these out of the area, they can have a lot of like second, third order effects, that can be pretty devastating for the area. Another interesting thing is remember that, if you have a lot of individuals in a small area, you can basically remove them very easily. So this is basically made even worse by the fact that they're all mature pregnant females in a shallow area and, right where humans like to interact. So it's not like they're very good at hiding from us. So like if people decided, hey, let's remove all these mature like pregnant females, that would have a huge, like way worse impact than just like removing the same number, but of like half males, half females. You're removing a lot of like the reproductive power that those species have in that area. So vulnerable species. So like we saw back in the past, they were very vulnerable until they banned that gillnet fishery. So although the species is doing well now, something to keep our eye on to make sure it stays that way for as long as possible. So also, if we know what temperatures that kind of brings them together, whether it's an El Nino year or not, the kind of conditions they're looking for, as like if global ocean temperatures continue to rise, maybe their distribution will start to move north. Then we got to make sure, those fisheries are acting responsibly also and making sure that, this species, again, is healthy for many years to come. All right. So, yeah, thanks again for coming out this morning. I'll be here for questions, and then again at 11:30 for more questions. So, yeah, thanks a lot. Yay. Questions? What do you got? Yes, sir. That's a great question. So, yeah, if they're reaching sexual maturity around like 10 to 12 years, I mean, I would expect that they'd probably be able to get into like 40 plus, right? Wow. So, yeah, I'm not exactly sure on that, but that's my best guess. Thank you. Yep. What else we got? Yes.
What does it mean? What's the composition of the water?
Not so much. As of right now, just from that previous work that basically, like, I think they might have done a little bit more of that, where they pretty much, like, looked at everything and then saw that it was pretty much temperature. Like, temperature was, like, the number one drive that was causing them to, like, perform this behavior. So that's the number one thing.
So what do they eat on?
So during the day, there's, like, pretty much no observed, like, feeding. Like, they're pretty much more so nocturnal, so they're just kind of there hanging out, increasing that body temperature so they can shorten that gestation time period is like the number one like hypothesis out there. At night, they tend to, forage out. And yeah, it's mostly like, so they're like bottom feeders. So they're going to find like a lot of invertebrates, fish eggs, worms, maybe some small fish here and there, crabs, things like that. Up like a little bit further north, there's like a tidal basin that they'll go into where during the high tide, they'll swim up, basically feed on like all these worms that are in the like sediment. And then tide will go back out, and then they'll swim back out. So they don't quite do that behavior here, but something pretty interesting to just kind of see the kind of things they eat. Yeah.
How do they communicate?
That's a great question. So, I mean, there's a little bit of body language in different species where, they might like posture, but other than that, I mean, could be even like some pheromone stuff, but that's a stretch. I'm not too sure about that, so I think it's mostly like a visual thing, but that's, yeah. What you got? A lot of sharks, well, because they breed and because they've been protected pretty well here in Southern California for a long time. What you got?
My husband's going to shoot me. We're moored in Cat Harbor. Am I okay to go in the water?
Yeah. So, I mean, like, there's snorkelers that swim with these things, like, constantly. I would imagine you would have to do something pretty outrageous for one of these to care that you were there. So, I've dove with them a few times, and I mean, they just have absolutely no concern for us. If anything, they're more afraid of us. We're roughly the same size they are, so they see us more as a threat probably than anything. Yeah.
Do they like both warm water and?
Yes. So when they go into the warm water, it can actually be kind of bad for them in a sense that it becomes expensive energetically, so they have to eat more, right? So if they go to the warm water, they have to eat a lot. So they typically like to be in slightly cooler waters. That's where they hunt and where they're more active and they can save energy. Triple change.
Big marks.
The seals have bite marks? Okay, yeah. I mean, there are not so much leopard sharks, but
And Dad told us a shark did it.
Yeah, so definitely there are some sharks that do eat things like seals, sea lions, but those are typically a lot bigger, like white sharks, where they might even start their lives a little bit smaller, go after like fish and stuff, then eventually move on to like seals, sea lions, big like marine mammals. A lot of energy. What you got?
Do sharks sleep?
Interestingly enough, they do believe that sharks do in fact sleep. We actually, from some of our white shark data that we got recently, where we'll like do an active track, so we'll put a little tag on them and follow them around for a little while. When the data came back, they actually do like little concentric circles, like perfect circles, and then they'll reverse direction. So one of the things they think might be going on is they actually like will shut down one half of the brain at a time, sleep, and then shut down the other half of the brain, swim the other direction. So pretty cool. Yeah. What else we got?
Wait, what?
Yes, sir.
How large do they get at full maturity?
So I think about 100 centimeters is roughly where they reach maturity. So I'd expect, I think around like 6 feet roughly is what you could expect for some of the biggest ones to get to. Yeah. Big fish.
We've seen them out here in the lagoon here. Biggest we've seen is about 3 feet,
Okay, okay.
but bigger ones do come in.
Yeah. Yeah, and then because the females tend to get larger than the males, and because it's mostly females doing this, you'd expect to see larger ones. Yeah.
Big shark.
Big shark on the what, sorry?
Yes, Jaws, yes.
Oh, yeah. No, that was fake. That was just a fake shark, yeah. Yeah. I was probably his age when I saw that movie. What you got?
Are these?
As far as I know, they are carnivores. There are a few shark species out there that do eat like non-meat items, but it's fairly limited. They're mostly carnivores. Yes, sir.
Is the average size of the shark related to the overall population? When the population declines, does it change the average size?
I haven't seen anything on that. I would expect that if there was like a lot of fishing pressure, most of it, like, we usually select for larger ones to take out. So if there's large fishing pressure, I would imagine that the individuals you find would tend to be smaller. But if left alone, I would expect that they would end up growing to a full size, especially if there was plenty of food available. So if they had like really rough conditions or there wasn't food available, maybe you'd see smaller sizes.
This is kind of related to the sea lion question. Since they're bottom feeders, isn't the shape of their mouth not really able to bite a bigger animal, or no?
Like a human.
Like a human. I think you may have a couple kids nowadays. So I just was trying to. I was under the impression that most bottom feeders couldn't even open their mouths in a way like the bigger ones could. But
there was actually a video on Facebook not too long ago of a nurse shark that basically like bit somebody. They were feeding them though, you know what I mean, like hand feeding them. And so they actually use like suction feeding. So although like a nurse shark is absolutely like a bottom feeder, ended up like sucking the girl's arm and she's okay. But yeah, like. So
unless you like stick your hand in your mouth, you're pretty good.
If you leave these guys unprovoked, like you are absolutely not a menu item for them. So as you can see, like they do have teeth. That mouth can like kind of open up and protrude out. But if you leave these guys alone, you will be okay. But yeah.
Are they actually like known to enjoy human contact, or really tend to shy away?
I wouldn't imagine that they enjoy it. I would say they tolerate it.
Yeah.
So they're on the bottom, basically resting, bathing in warm water, and then like some snorkelers, like got a GoPro in their face, and they're just kind of going to deal with it. If you get too close, they just kind of swim off and find another spot to hang. Yes.
How would you further test your hypothesis about the shortened gestation that would you capture some of the young, newly born ones, and then would you be able to tell if they indeed had a shorter gestation?
So some of the papers I've read that, like in a lot of other like similar species, what they've done is basically in a laboratory environment, you'll have pregnant, like a number of pregnant females in like one, like the coolest temperature, and then integrate it up into the warmest temperature. You're going to do that where they're still going to live, but it's at the higher end of their limits. Then basically they measure how long it takes them to give birth, essentially. And so they found that, like, I think it was some kind of stingray, so very similar to sharks, shortened it by like a full month, just by like 1 degree Celsius, So it's pretty interesting how, like, because they're ectotherms and if you increase the body temperatures, you therefore increase the metabolism, they can basically sell some excursion.
But is this aggregation only happening in areas where there is a large amount of fishing going on, or?
No, not typically. So I think this is something that they'll do regardless of like what we're doing, right? So they'll come to shallow water to find this warm water. Probably been doing it for a very long time. For people really were out here in big numbers in California.
I think we have time for one more question from that young
Yeah,
gentleman
sure.
in the back.
Yeah.
I don't make sharks?
How do they make sharks? These are live birds. These are live birds. All right. Well, I'll see everybody at 11:30 if you pick up some more questions.